Imagine you are standing in the middle of a supermarket in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. It is a Tuesday morning in 2018. The air is humid, the fluorescent lights are flickering, and your heart is racing. In your pocket, you have a thick stack of bolívar notes, the monthly salary you just received an hour ago. But you aren't here to browse. You are in a literal race against time. You reach for a carton of eggs. There is no price tag on the shelf. You ask the clerk, and he shouts a number that sounds like a phone extension. You look at your stack of cash. It is enough. But as you walk toward the register, a man with a digital label gun walks past you and clicks. The price of those eggs just doubled. By the time you reach the front of the line, your monthly salary, the product of 30 days of your life and labor, is no longer enough to buy a dozen eggs. It can now only buy 3. In Venezuela, holding onto your own currency became like holding a block of melting ice in the middle of a desert. You can feel the cold water dripping through your fingers, and you know that if you do not trade it for anything right now, it will be gone forever. You clicked on this video because you have seen the headlines about ghost cities, the death of the dollar, and the new feudalism. You have heard the whispers that the global economy is resting on a shaky foundation of debt and printed money. You want to know if the ground beneath your own feet is as stable as you've been told. In the next 20 minutes, we are not just looking at a failed state. We are performing a forensic audit of an economic suicide. You are going to learn how a nation sitting on a literal swimming pool of gold, more oil than Saudi Arabia, more resources than almost any nation on the planet, managed to delete 80% of its economy in a single decade. We are going to look into the Venezuela mirror to understand why the laws of math do not care about your politics, and why gravity always wins in the end. The most expensive suicide in history. To understand why Nicolas Maduro might eventually find himself in a holding cell, we have to look at the bill. In 2013, Venezuela was the wealthiest nation in South America. It was the emerald of the continent. Today, it is a crime scene. This is not just a story about a dictator. It is a story about Dutch disease, the destruction of trust, and what happens when a government decides it can print wealth out of thin air. Most countries try to fix a broken economy with a band-aid. Venezuela decided to do surgery with a flamethrower. We are looking at the final bill of a lost decade. 14 zeros deleted from the currency, a population that lost an average of 19 pounds because they could not afford to eat, and a displacement crisis larger than the war in Syria. Part 1. The Black Gold Trap. Let's start with a number: 300 billion. That is roughly the number of barrels of proven oil reserves sitting under Venezuelan soil. To put that in perspective, that is a larger stash than Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or Iran. On paper, every Venezuelan should be a trust fund baby. They should have the high-speed rail of Singapore and the sovereign wealth fund of Norway. But oil is a jealous god. For decades, Venezuela was infected with the terminal case of Dutch disease. It is a term economists use to describe a resource curse. When you make so much money selling one thing, oil, your currency gets artificially strong. Suddenly, it is cheaper to import everything from Miami or Brazil than it is to make it at home. Why grow tomatoes in the fertile Venezuelan countryside when you can buy them for pennies from abroad? Why build car factories when you can just import Toyotas with oil checks? Venezuela stopped being a country that made things and became a country that cashed checks. They became a one-legged stool, and that leg was made of black gold. When Hugo Chavez and later Maduro took the wheel, they did not just inherit a dependency on oil, they inherited a broken pump. In a moment of ego that would eventually doom the nation, the government fired nearly 20,000 experienced engineers and geologists from PDVSA, the state oil company, because they dared to go on strike. They were replaced by political loyalists, people who knew how to chant slogans, but did not know how to maintain high-pressure subterranean pipes. By the time the oil price crashed in 2014, the infrastructure was rotting, pumps were rusting, pipelines were leaking, and the infinite money glitch was finally patched by reality. Production collapsed from 3 million barrels a day to just 337,000. It was the equivalent of a baker selling his ovens for scrap metal and then acting surprised when he has no bread to sell. Part 2. When the money printer goes bar. When the oil money died, the government still had bills to pay. They had to pay the military, the subsidies, and the massive social programs that kept the population compliant. A normal government would raise taxes or cut spending. Maduro looked at the central bank and said, "Print it." This was not just inflation. This was hyperinflation. This was economic velocity that broke the speedometer. By 2018, inflation hit a staggering 130,000%. Some estimates put it over 300,000%. When you hit those numbers, the social contract is shredded. Prices stopped being facts and became trick questions. Just like we see in other collapsing economies, waiters stopped printing menus because the price of a steak would double between the appetizer and the bill. The currency became so worthless that it was cheaper to use bolívar notes as napkins or weave them into colorful purses for tourists than to actually use them as money. This is the destruction of price. An economy relies on trust that the piece of paper in your hand represents a specific amount of human effort. Maduro took that trust and set it on fire. By destroying the currency, he turned every transaction into a panic attack. People spent their paychecks the second they got them, buying bleach, rice, or car tires, anything that would hold its value better than the melting ice of the bolívar. Part 3. The Hunger Games. If you think losing your savings is bad, wait until you hear what happened to the food. Because when the money dies, the hunger begins. In 2016, dark jokes started circulating in Caracas. They called it the Maduro diet. The punchline was that it gets you skinny, but it does not make you fit. It wasn't funny, but when you are starving, humor is the only nutrient you have left. According to university studies, 75% of the population lost significant weight due to malnutrition in a single year. The government's solution was not to fix the economy. It was to weaponize the scarcity. They created the clap boxes, subsidized food packages delivered directly to households. On paper, it looked like a relief effort. In reality, it was a political leash. If you protested, no box for you. If you did not support the regime, the truck broke down in your neighborhood. Even worse, forensic audits revealed that the regime's inner circle was getting rich off the hunger. They were importing low-quality powdered milk from Mexico at massive markups, billing the state millions, and pocketing the difference. They turned starvation into a business model. Part 4. The Great Escape. When a house is on fire, you do not debate the merits of the architecture. You jump out the window. Since 2014, roughly 7.7 million people, about 25% of the country, have fled. This is the human capital hemorrhage. It was not just a loss of people, it was a loss of brains. Surgeons moved to Miami to wash dishes because their Venezuelan salary dropped to $6 a month. Electrical engineers moved to Spain. Teachers moved to Colombia. This is the hidden cost that truly nailed the coffin shut. When the power grid failed, and it did, there was no one left who knew how to fix the turbines. When the oil rigs broke, the guys who knew the pressure settings were thousands of miles away. Venezuela became a country of ghosts and the elderly, ruled by a regime that had exiled its own future. Part 5. The Infrastructure Apocalypse. Imagine you are in an elevator on the 20th floor of a luxury high-rise. Or you are a surgeon mid-incision. And then, click. In March 2019, Venezuela went dark. Not for an hour. For nearly a week. The Guri Dam, which provides 80% of the country's power, failed. The government blamed cyber attacks and snipers. But the truth was simpler: negligence. They stopped cutting the grass around the substations, leading to fires. They stopped replacing parts. The system simply gave up. When the power died, the water pump stopped. People were seen scooping water from the Guer River, a river so polluted it is essentially liquid sewage, just to flush their toilets. This was the moment the economy stopped being about numbers on a screen and became a physical threat to life. The state had failed to provide the two most basic things a civilization needs: light and water. Part 6. The Gangster Pivot. When the oil money dried up and the people left, the regime turned to the gangster economy. They opened up the Amazon to illegal gold mining, a zone bigger than Portugal called the Mining Arc. This was not industrial mining. It was the Wild West. They used toxic mercury that poisoned the water of indigenous tribes. The gold was then flown out on private planes to be sold for off-the-books cash to keep the military generals loyal. Then there are the allegations of the cartel of the Suns, the idea that the state became a logistics department for drug trafficking. The $15 million bounty placed on Maduro, is head by the US Department of Justice turned his own bodyguards into potential lottery ticket holders. When an economy is bankrupt, loyalty has a price tag, and $15 million is a very attractive price. The final verdict. So, what is the lesson of the Venezuela mirror? It proves that you cannot financialize your way to prosperity. You cannot print concrete or eat oil. Eventually, the laws of math assert themselves. Venezuela is a warning to every nation that thinks it can ignore its productive base, mask its rot with debt, or treat its national treasury like a personal piggy bank. It shows us that a superpower status is a fragile thing, built entirely on the trust of the people. Once that trust is gone, the currency is just paper, and the skyscrapers are just tombstones. The tragedy of Venezuela is that it was not destroyed by a foreign army. It was a self-inflicted wound. It was the most expensive transition in history, a transition that came too late and cost too much. If you found this forensic audit valuable, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that you value financial reality over political fantasy. And let me know in the comments, do you think your own country is ignoring the warning signs in the mirror, or are we safe from the infinite money glitch trap? I'm the Stay Financial Historian. Stay sharp, stay solvent, and remember, in a world of melting ice, it's better to own the freezer. I'll see you in the next one.